Hello there and welcome once again to Survival Sweden channel. And look at that, absolutely glorious. The sun is blazing down and it's reached a colossal, I don't know, 7 in the shade. But in the sun it's great, absolutely beautiful and hot and warm and everything else and nice. Anyway, here's my old Mitsubishi Pajero on which the brake pipes were pretty much shagged and they needed to be redone. So I was busy with that and I'd never done brake pipes before in my life. And I don't know, perhaps I'm a bit autistic or on the spectrum or something, but when I started looking on YouTube, watching the different videos, reading up on it, I found what I thought to be conflicting information, as in just a little bit different each time. So I thought I'd make a video about it, hopefully to help people. And first of all was the ordering issue. So I wanted to order simply a roll of brake pipe, which sort of comes like this. And you get all different lengths. You get your 1 length, your 2, your 5 and your 10. But it's probably worth getting a long length. This was 10 meters for the simple reason that you've always got it spare. They're pretty much standard on all vehicles. And you know, you never know, once you're under there and you start poking about and you see other corroded or damaged parts of the brake system, you make sure that you've got enough to do it. And the reason is it's so cheap. Now this one I bought from Temu, the online web shop, and it came in a padded bag like this. And what came with it was you can order just the pipe alone, but you can order it with, guess what, these fixings. And there are 2 types of fixings in there. And this package cost absolutely nothing. I mean, I think it was around £25 with the extra pieces, which is about 300 Swedish krona, 30 euro, a bit less, something like that. And these are the 2 different types of connections you get. You get this slimline one here, which has what we call an olive in each side of the thread. So you put your pipe through it and you put your olive over the top of the pipe first, and then you put your pipe in there and screw it tight. And the olive, this little flange, it crushes itself around the pipe, and it's a high pressure fitting and it doesn't let any brake fluid past. The other one is this, which means that you've got to put a flange on the end of your pipe, which is quite easy. I've got the tool and I'll show you in just a moment. So you slide this over your copper pipe and then you make whichever flange is relevant for your vehicle, and then you just screw it in there, and you've got another way of fixing the pipe together if you need to do it in different lengths. Now the reason you might want to do it in different lengths is because this is one of the broken bits I took out. It's not very big, as you can see, but sometimes you get very long ones which go the whole length of the vehicle, and they've got some folds like this or bends at one end and at the other end as well. So to feed it over the petrol tank and round the exhaust, whatever you've got to do with it, it's not easy in one piece without bending it all over the place and getting it caught and all the rest. So what you can do with one of these kits is you can do it in 2 halves. Feed in one from the back, for example, one from the front, and as long as you've got access to the point at which they meet, you can put on a connector. So that makes life a lot easier. So I would definitely recommend getting a little bag of connectors like this. Now when it comes to the standards, what you're ordering, that was a tough one for me, because I've seen these described as 5mm brake pipes, which they sort of are to the eye, but they're also described as 4.6s, 4.75s, 4.76s and 3/16ths of an inch. And the thing is, these originally, as far as I can work out, were 3/16ths of an inch, which is correctly 4.76 millimeters. But people just refer to them the easy way, and they're calling them 4.5s or 4.6s or 4.76s and so on. So that's where it was confusing. Almost certainly it's a 3/16th and it's a 4.76, which people will call a 5. And that means you know what to order, because I was really confused by that. Let me think now, what can I show you? When it comes to flaring the pipes, right, so we've got the fittings here. This is what goes in the brake caliper. Obviously an old and decrepit one. And you can see the pipe here was very rusty. And the way to get these out is if you just try to use a spanner. Of course, as you've got a spanner working on a nut like this, in effect, it's actually making a yeah, a bit of an imprecise movement in different directions, and you might end up breaking this off. And if you break that off in the caliper, you're going to have to take the caliper off. You're going to have to drill it out, retap it at best. Maybe you're going to end up buying a new caliper, depending on what you're capable of and what you have in your workshop. So the best way to do this is to nip the pipe off straight away. You can bend it off to break it, or you can use something like a little hacksaw like this. Just cut the pipe off very close to the end, and then use a socket. There you go. Because when you're using a socket, you can control better which way you've got the forces on it, and it's gripping on every face of the nut there. So removing those things is do the risk assessment, think it through. You know, if one of these does break off in the caliper, you're making a huge job, so it's worth being very careful. And I'll show you in a moment how we do that bit under the car. But before we do that, I will show you how you make the flanges. Now, there are 3 types of flanges. That means the bend which you need to make in the end of the pipe to make it seal into your brake caliper or whatever fitting it's going into. And there are 2 which are very common and 1 which is not. The common ones are on the same size of pipe, and this is the first stage. So this is a flare, not a flange, I apologise. So this is a single flare. Once you use exactly the same tool for making both flares. So you use the tool, which is this little fellow, just the once to make your first flare, and then you take it out of the tool, you move it, replace it in the tool, and bend it again, which gives you the second, a double flare. That's the double flare. So you can see that the difference in the stages there. And all you have to do is very simple. So you put your new fitting over the pipe. I can't because this one's flared now, but you put it over the pipe and then you make your flare, and you mustn't forget to put this on first because you can't get it off. Otherwise you can't get it on or off. Now when it came to bending the pipe, I've been used to playing with copper pipes for plumbing for years, and I thought, well, if I try and bend one of these narrow gauge pipes, I'm just going to break it. You know, it's going to kink and it's going to be hopeless. So I thought, with my little knowledge, I will buy a pipe bender, and it's a fine little thing, I'm sure. But you can see the radius here is actually quite big, you know, what, 3 or 5 centimeter radius. And I'm sure this makes them very neat and very lovely, but you just don't need them. Firstly, because some of the radiuses you're going to have to make are going to be a lot tighter than that, and I'll show you under the car in a minute. And secondly, because this pipe is very, very malleable. It's not like the stuff you get for copper pipes for plumbing. It's very different. You can bend it by hand. It's difficult with just one hand holding the camera, but it really is easy. It's, you know, not everyone, maybe some young ladies can't do it, but everyone can basically. It's pretty forgiving, it's pretty simple, and it's not a problem. So you don't need a bending tool. In fact, as I say, the bending tool is useless for numerous different bends and applications. So save yourself a bit of money that way. And the way to prepare the brake pipes is this is where it was cut off at one end, and this is where I cut it off at the other end. And so now I've got a very simple pattern to copy. So I take my copper pipe and I just bend it very slowly and gently, take my time. It takes, 15 minutes or something maximum to get it almost exact in 3 dimensions to copy the old pipe. Now, very important is to photograph where the old pipe went, because it can be really awkward trying to work out where it ran. And what you don't want it to do is to touch any bits of steel, etc., where vibrations might wear through it. So you want to run it in the proper way, and you can see the remnants here of a rubber grommet which was on some sort of bracket which held the pipe steady. So you want to replicate those, and it stops them vibrating or moving into positions where they shouldn't be. So you know the original manufacturers put these in a sensible place, and it's not difficult to make something to replace it, just a bent piece of metal with some rubber inside it so that the metal one metal doesn't vibrate and destroy the other. Then we come to the types of pipe. This was an old piece that I had lying about. I didn't think I had enough of it, so I ordered more. And this is from a local Swedish shop called Biltema, known for being, you know, pretty cheap with their car parts. And you can see that this is copper. Normally, brake pipe is a compound of copper and nickel, if I remember rightly. But this, if you look on the inside, you can see it's all copper coloured. It is solid copper. Whereas the pipe which I bought from Temu, and it said it, you know, it was clear about it, is copper coated. So this is, I believe, steel, very thin and easy to work, but it's covered in copper to stop it from rusting, so it's not solid. But, you know, then it concerned me which ones are actually good enough. And I think the simple answer to that is, if companies have got them for sale on the internet, if brake pipes are failing, everybody would know pretty quickly. They'd lose their reputation, they'd get closed down, etc. So I think that everything is available that is available on the internet is going to be fine for the job, basically. Now, when we come to the bending machine, this is made by Parkside. It's from Lidl. It's fairly cheap. I think it was about 500 kroner, which is about £40, because they come in all different prices from £18 on Amazon up to more than £100. But this one's perfectly adequate. This is made of, I'm pretty sure that's stainless steel, but it's very heavy and it's very good quality. And what I mentioned earlier about, you know, people talking about 4mm, 4.5, 4.7, you see this is labelled 5, and this one goes into the 5mm hole. So 5 is what it's often referred to, which it confused me to start with. Anyway, it's very simple to use, because you put in this little, you put your pipe through it and you clamp it up tight. So you can see it's got a sort of, it's not a thread, it's just a gripping surface in there, which holds your pipe very, very hard, very securely. And then you bring it through to a certain depth, and the instructions are pretty good. You know, there's a big paper here with instructions in about 1 million different languages. And you put this through, which gives you, this thickness is the guide as to how much it should stick out. You make it stick out, you put this inside your pipe, and then you put on your clamping device, which has a little cone at the end, and you screw it tight. And again, it's just hand tight, it's not difficult. And that will flare out to produce your first flare. And then you move it around in the device and you produce your second flare, something that looks roughly like that, which is bent in again. So that's dead simple. And as I say, the instructions they're really quite good, actually, simple, to the point, and they do the job. One thing to note is that copper, if you heat it to red hot, then douse it in water very suddenly, a very quick cooling, you have what's called an annealing effect. And annealing copper makes it very soft, malleable, workable. And so if you find it hard to do any of these flares, which I don't think anyone will, or you're worried about the copper splitting, whatever it is, you can always do that process. Literally just a blowtorch, just heat it up to red hot. And obviously if you're doing it in the sunshine, you can't see when it's red hot, you need a little bit of shade. Straight to red hot, and then douse it in cold water immediately, not 1 or 2 seconds later, immediately. The faster the better, and that makes, the faster you do it, the softer the copper is going to be. And that is how you can reuse copper washers, by annealing them. So if I take you under the car then, with a couple of bits and pieces, if I can carry them, bear with me. So right, here we are under the Shogun. Lots of space on this car. Not all cars have a lot of space, but the Shogun's a big car. There's the bleed nipple. It's just got its little rubber cap. You take your rubber cap off there, and you're going to need to bleed the air out of the brake system once you put on a new pipe, whether it's a big one or a small one. So you're going to need to have that brake nipple loose. So before you make the pipe, I would suggest checking that you can get that loose. They do get corroded in place. They can be really, really awkward. And the way to get them out is basically with a blowtorch. So first thing is you get all the crud and the muck that's built up for years from around here as much as you can with a wire brush. Not a great wide one, but use a nice thin one, or even a toothbrush, and make sure that all the mud and the muck is off there as best you can, so that the heat will transfer to that, and so there's not loads of muck to fall into the hole once you've made it. by unscrewing that bleed nipple. Once you've got all the crud away, put some penetrating oil on there, heat it up with a blowtorch. The thing to be careful of is that this pipe here is rubber. There are rubber seals inside around the piston in the brake caliper itself. There will be rubber here on the brake caliper sliders. So if you get that too hot, then you're going to melt the rubber and you've got a big problem. So you'd be surprised how much heat you can get there as long as you're directing it carefully. You know, work from a little bit above, from the sides, and every now and then just feel anywhere near the rubber. Make sure you're not getting it too hot, but you can really work on that as long as you focus your flame and you check it regularly. And there are basically two ways of really working this loose. One is that you get this or the outside red hot. By the time you've got this red hot, you're going to be damaging rubber. You might get this red hot, but then if you try to twist it because it's soft, it's just going to break. So it's a good idea to heat it up, let it cool down, put some spray oil on there, heat it up again, let it cool down, spray oil. And again, using the risk assessment in the sense that if you do break this off, you're making a very big job for yourself. Maybe new caliper, maybe lots of work taking it off, etc. More rusty bolts to break. So patience is the answer with this one. And another tip is the same as when you take the brake pipes off. Don't try to use a spanner like this. If you can help it, put a socket over it so the socket is gripping evenly all around. And when you put a turning effect on it, work it both ways. You won't actually feel it move at first at all, but put some torque and some momentum in one direction, then in the other, then the other, then the other. And surprisingly, even though one way is actually technically tightening, as I say, it's not actually moving, it's just rocking the threads a little, and it will really help. And one thing you can do is, especially if you're going to throw these away, assuming they're damaged and corroded, you can take a hammer and just tap it, and it's called, a good sharp shock on top, and it's called springing the threads. And it just sends a vibration down through the threads, and sometimes that's enough to loosen the corroded threads inside. For me, I would do all three. Plenty of penetrating oil, leave it overnight, heating and cooling, and springing the threads occasionally, and using a socket to move it. So, and you do much the same with the ends of the brake pipes. Now, this is one of the little pipes I replaced, and you can see this is a very tight radius. It's no bigger than my fingertip, which is why the brake bending tool was not going to work. And I thought this is going to be really difficult and this is going to kink and it's going to break. But no, just a little bit of patience. You don't even need to heat the pipe. Just work on it cold with your fingers and your thumb, and you can get it right. It's not too difficult. Now, this pipe was a little bit interesting because you can buy the same one for the back and the front of the car. The front one is protected by this metal spring. The back one is not, but they're about the same price, about 120 Swedish krona, which is £9, something like that. But, having this protection is good. And this one is actually technically 1 or 2 centimetres longer. But as you can see, that makes no difference. There's nothing for it to rub on or get damaged on. So I would suggest, looking through the catalogue, when you're going to buy one of these, check the front ones. If they're any different from the back, check if any are better protected than the others. As long as it reasonably fits in there, it's going to do the job. You've got these little clips here, which is what holds, you can see I've loosened this one here. This holds this assembly in place. So you can get that out pretty easily with a hammer and chisel or a screwdriver, just being careful not to damage it. Even though it was deadly rusty, covered in muck, it came out pretty easily, and it goes in pretty easily too. I'll just tap that in later, and you can always bend it a little more if you need it to sit any tighter. And there is the other pipe that I changed. That one goes off across the axle where you can't quite see it, and it was a little bit more challenging to do, but it wasn't difficult at all. And that was the longer pipe that I showed you earlier when I was demonstrating how to copy the original pipe. And I think that's most of what I want to say, apart from bleeding. Yay! Yeah, the old way of bleeding was you get 2 people and you put a pipe on here, and the pipe goes down into a little bottle to receive your brake fluid. So you make sure the reservoir of brake fluid under the bonnet is pretty full. That's very important, so you don't get air into the system. And then once you've had this loose, you crack open this nut. It's only about a quarter of a turn or a half a turn maximum. And that will let the brake fluid come out of here. So you put a thin, transparent rubber pipe on here, and then you say to someone down, they press the pedal down, and then you lock this, and then you say to them up, and they lift the pedal up. And then you start to open it, you say down, and you open it, and the more brake fluid comes out, and then you tighten it, and you say to them up, and they let their foot up. And in this way, the fluid is always coming in an out direction and bringing air with it. And once you see, at first, you'll see more and more bubbles coming along, and eventually all the bubbles disappear, and you've got pure brake fluid coming out. Do remember to top up the reservoir, very important, because obviously it's draining through here. Now, to make that process simpler, in theory, and a one-man job, you get one of these kits, which is, the other end of this pipe. This is what goes onto the bleed nipple, which I'll show you. Just clean it off a little bit. And you press it around there, which can be a bit of a mission sometimes. And you get different size of these rubber ends, so they fit different bleed nipples. So you just put it over something like that to make sure it's watertight. And then the other end of that pipe inside this bottle, which is full of old brake fluid now, has a non-return valve. So in theory, every time you put the pedal down, the brake pedal, it's pushing fluid this way and it can't return. So you can just push it up and down and it clears the air out of the brake system. In my experience, you can be lucky. These sometimes work. Often the non-return valve is not of high enough quality, and it's not the best way to do it. It's much easier generally to have two people use this if you're desperate. I've had success with it occasionally. Generally, I find it's a real fiddle and it's just not pleasant and not worth messing about with. Anyway, I'll show you where you top up the brake fluid. Sorry, bear with me because this is a long old rant, isn't it? It must be very annoying for people, but I'm hoping that I'm going to cover pretty much everything in one video. Right, try and get the thing supported. Don't want to be guillotined by it, killed by the Shogun. Why does that make me think of a James Clavell book? Anyway, this is the brake fluid reservoir. You just unscrew the top and you can see the brake fluid, which should be renewed every few years, by the way, every year or two, depending on the manufacturer. But very few people do, but you should. And the reason is it's hygroscopic, this fluid, which means it attracts water from the air and it loses its more excellent qualities once it's got water in it from the air. It will say on the lid, always says on the lid, what type of brake fluid to use, and they are different. So you can have DOT3 and DOT4, which was Department of Transport Type 3 or Department of Transport Type 4. And they are different, so you can't intermix them. So be careful to read what's on the lid, and don't reuse the old brake fluid because of that effect, as I say, of it being hygroscopic. Anyway, I hope that covers pretty much everything. Sorry for ranting, being boring, but I hope it teaches you pretty much what you need to know in one video. And it took me 3 hours to do this job the first time, reading all the instructions. Never done it before in my life. A little bit worried about it, and honestly now it was dead easy. I could do it in half an hour now, no problem at all. And yeah, it cost nearly nothing, and I've got so many bits left over here. I could do 3 or 4 more cars without any problem, and it's fine. Works very, very well. So good luck with that.